There he goes. Well, the photographer asked if I would bang the gavel harder than normal, so he would know. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 26 de comité.
Welcome to meeting number 26 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics.
Order 1083H and the motion adopted on Wednesday, September 17, 2025. The committee is resuming its study of the challenges posed by artificial intelligence and its regulation. With us today, we have the Honourable Evan Solomon, who is the Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation, and with him from the Department of Industry, Mark Sean, who is the Associate Deputy Minister. Minister, I'm going to allow up to 5 minutes to address the committee, sir, and then we'll be following that with questions. Go ahead. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair.
Opportunity to appear before you today. As you said, Mr. Chair, I'm joined by officials from my department, and I appreciate the committee's deep interest in this kind of work. As some of you know, I've already appeared before the Science and Research Committee in the fall session and again just this week to discuss my mandate and to share with committee members the work we're doing to build trust with Canadians concerning artificial intelligence. Je suis honoré d'être devant vous aujourd'hui.
I am very happy to be before you today and to take part in this essential study on artificial intelligence.
Transformative technology, and if used properly, it will improve people's lives and serve Canadians for the better. That is our mission. That is our goal. I'm glad that this committee is here to dig into the foundational issue that we need in order to have responsible, reliable AI, and that is trust. Si les Canadiens veulent profiter pleinement d'advantages...
Canadians are to take full advantage of artificial intelligence. They have to be reassured that the technology is used in a safe, fair, and responsible manner.
Be those that use this technology responsibly in ways that people can trust and actually make life better. AI is meant to serve people, not the other way around. As the First Minister of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Innovation for Canada, I've been working towards a renewed national AI strategy for Canadians almost 2 years ahead of schedule. Trust, safety, and responsibility are the foundations of that work. Our AI strategy is anchored in one core principle and 3 pillars. The core principle is very simple: AI for all, l'IA pour tous. And the 3 pillars are build, empower, and protect. AI for all means this: no matter where you live in Canada, no matter your background, your age, or your income, this technology will work for you responsibly, reliably, and safely. It will strengthen our democracy and deliver better public services if we manage it correctly. It will create good jobs for Canadians and protect people, especially children and vulnerable communities, from harm. That's what the principle is. AI for all is already being put into action. It is guiding the final stages of our refreshed national AI strategy, which we'll be launching very soon. Our strategy is shaped by real input, ideas shared by Canadians through our public portal, expert advice from our AI task force, and their reports are now available for the public online, and insights from researchers, workers, and industry leaders across the country. The goal is simple: to set a clear direction where Canada is going in AI, how we get there, our own sovereign terms for our benefit. So if I may, I'll just walk you very briefly through what this means in practice in our 3 pillars: build, empower, and protect. First, build. We are building a strong, sovereign, safe AI foundation to drive economic growth and create prosperity. That requires the infrastructure, and in plain terms, it requires the compute power that allows Canadian companies to build and use Canadian technologies right here at home. That means security for Canadian data and peace of mind for the citizens of Canada. That means more opportunity for Canadian innovators, more resilience for our economy, and more jobs staying and built right here at home. This also means digital sovereignty. Sovereignty does not mean isolation. We're a trading nation, but it does mean having the capacity to choose where we build, where we scale, and keeping Canada under Canadian law. C'est une question de souveraineté numérique et de choix pour le Canada.
It's about digital sovereignty and the choices Canada makes.
It has extraordinary strengths in talent and research, and I just look at our 3 great AI national institutes, Mila in Montreal, Vector in Toronto, and Amy in Edmonton. They're global anchors of excellence built by pioneers who helped shape modern AI. Our focus now is to shorten the distance between impact and insight, turning Canada's world-leading AI science into real-life adoption, higher productivity, and companies that scale here at home. I'll give you an example. We have a new initiative just in the last month, a $100 million venture science fund launched by Mila and the VC company Innovia to invest in scientists to turn their ideas into action. That progress only matters if Canadians are part of it. Investing in skills and training is an essential part to make sure people in every region succeed in our AI-driven economy. Third, protect. Trust must underpin everything we do, and it is the foundation. That's why in 2024 we launched the Canadian AI Safety Institute, bringing together leading researchers from inside and outside government to focus on the real risks and the real safeguards associated with advanced AI. This work is connected with international partners because safety in AI is a global challenge that requires global cooperation. And we're committed to modernizing Canada's privacy framework to protect Canadians' data, safeguard children online, and ensure that as AI evolves, people's rights remain at the center of our approach. I know you're wrapping up, Mr. Chair. Protection means Canadians will have the tools to protect them from harm. AI is moving quickly, so are we. We're building in Canada, we're buying in Canada, and we're building a safe AI for all Canadians to thrive in the future. Merci.
Thank you. We're going to go to questions. First round, 6 minutes. Mr. Barrett, go ahead.
Minister, I have a bunch of questions. They're going to be brief. I appreciate that it's a complex topic, but I'd ask if you could keep your responses equally brief. The first thing I'd like to just touch on with you is the Canada Revenue Agency developed Charlie the chatbot, and Charlie the chatbot did a really bad job. And his reliability, or its reliability, certainly did not meet minimum service standards or the expectations of Canadians who have to get it right to the penny when they deal with CRA, but the chatbot didn't even get it right half of the time with the advice it gave. Do you have are you drawing from this lessons that you are going to apply to the use of AI in its rollout across the federal public service or the government?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Yeah, I'm obviously aware of how our government is scaling the use of AI across departments and agency. There is an effort to drive transformation across government and support a more efficient public service so we can serve Canadians better. And of course, AI is meant to serve public servants, and we have CanChat and GC Translate. I will say that the Treasury Board Secretariat has a public register of hundreds of government uses of AI. When something is not functioning as it should, obviously there are specific measures to make sure that action is taken to serve Canadians more accurately and in a better fashion. Absolutely.
So Minister, but just for clarity, this cost taxpayers $18 million, and 66% of the time it provided incorrect information to tax filers. Acceptable, unacceptable?
I think every moment the government serves Canadians, Canadians demand the highest standards and the highest form of efficiency. And I will say I know the Treasury Boards and PSPC has rigorous regulations and rules about how they procure and the standards, and absolutely meeting the high standards is the expectation of Canadians in any department. And so, working to improve that is core.
Minister, you'd say 34% accuracy is not acceptable.
I would say the goal for any use of any technology is to make sure that we serve Canadians with the highest accuracy level and the highest efficiency.
I wouldn't say that was the most efficient way to say that getting the answer right 34% of the time is unacceptable. And you can have the opportunity to say that in your next response. We've seen that the government is going to take a move to reduce the access to information for Canadians by limiting the retention of instant messages and email messages. We saw in the ArriveCAN scandal that key actors simply just deleted files. We've seen that departments are taking years to respond to access to information requests. What commitment or guarantee are you prepared to make that all of the audit trails and that in fact audit trails will be part of the integration and rollout of any AI systems in the government? Are you prepared to make that commitment today?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, I want to say two things about how both the Treasury Board functions under this and Mr. Ali functions under this. All procurement and all the regulations are followed rigorously to make sure there's transparency and accountability in our communication and in how these any procurement and any use of this technology will function.
So, for example, how much time do I have, Chair? 2 minutes. For example, you know, when an email is sent, there should be the opportunity for access to information requests to be made, but that happens from person to person. If there's simply work product being generated through an AI system, there's no paper trail of how we got to the end result. And if the end result is simply printed out on a piece of paper at an office, but the audit trail is disappeared instantly or after 15 days, obviously that doesn't provide the level of transparency that Canadians would look to have and look to get. For example, by either getting the information through an ATIP, through an inquiry of ministry, or by asking individuals to appear before parliamentary committees. We don't have that option with AI, unless that you would be responsible personally for coming to see us every time we had a question about an AI system.
Let's make sure. Again, I appreciate the question. Just a couple of, to make sure that we're clear, all records of business value are retained. Okay? Obviously, records that are transitory are not retained. They're transitory in nature. Again, we follow all the rules in terms of our record keeping, and when we're making a decision about procurement, as Treasury Board will, we're following the guiding principles across all of that. I will say that Treasury Board work does have some principles on the automated decision system making and guides for generative AI usage.
Minister,
so there are guidelines on that.
Minister, can we expect new rules and public consultations on what that's going to look like with respect to deepfakes and how we're going to protect children from the use of sexually exploitive and non-consensual image creation through AI systems?
Need a very, very quick response.
It's an excellent question. Absolutely. We already have a bill that's tabled by the Justice Minister because we believe that would make it a criminal offense to share sexually explicit deepfake imagery. We'd love to have support on that,
Thank you,
and I have
Minister.
lots more to say about
Madame
deepfakes.
Lapointe, pour
Key question.
commencer, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup. Bienvenue à vous.
Thank you, Minister, for being with us. I think you were talking about C16, which will cover what my colleague was referring to. So you referred to a strategy that is in the works on artificial intelligence. You said that it's going to come soon. Can you tell us a bit more on what soon is?
Yes, thank you so much for the question. And again, happy to talk about the bill we've put forward on non-consensual sharing of non-consensual sexualized imagery, especially those generated by deep fakes, the so-called synthetic imagery. We consider that a form of a criminal offense. We would like to, we have legislation about that. You know, this is a form of violence against vulnerable communities that we will be taking action on in some legislation. We've tabled some legislation, and there'll be more, a suite of legislation to deal with that. Part of our privacy, updating our privacy laws, which is part of my remit, but also I know part of heritage under Mr. Miller. So these are genuine concerns Canadians have. In terms of our strategy, maybe it's good to just tell Canadians that, you know, we had a national task force of 28 different experts from across the country who submitted their reports. from all different aspects, some on safety, some on workforce, some on skills and training, some on infrastructure, some on adoption. They're very thorough. They're very interesting. We had a series of roundtables. The public can see all those. It's very transparent. We also had more than 11,000 public responses, which is the largest in, I think, the ministry's history. And those were long, thoughtful responses from Canadians, and they're posted as well, so people can read that. We've also had multiple roundtables. This morning, I had a fantastic roundtable. It is Black History Month, and with Black Canadians in the tech space who had real concerns about things like bias. And we talked about transparency and automated decision systems to make sure that there's not built-in bias. And those are the kind of things that in our legislation we're looking at. And in our AI national strategy, as I say, building the infrastructure is part of it. Empowering a workforce, skills and training to make sure the workforce of the future is here. That's critical. But for this particular committee, I know you're seized with the protect side, the ethics of it. And this is a really important conversation. How do we have responsible, reliable AI to get the benefits and mitigate against the harms? And part of that protect strategy is our legislation. And part of that protect strategy is to build sovereign data centers and sovereign companies, because we believe sovereignty is a form of safety.
Merci beaucoup. On a encore du temps.
Thank you very much. We have more time. I thought that it was interesting that you referred to deepfakes and non-consensual imagery. Everyone is interested in this, I'm sure. You talked about the pillars of the strategy and how you had rounds of consultations when you prepared the strategy. And I'm assuming that you analyzed all of the input before coming up with the strategy itself. So you talked about the three pillars, the three components of the strategy. Would you like to elaborate a bit more on those three components?
And merci encore fois pour l'opportunité.
Thank you once again for the opportunity.
Just dig, maybe I can get a little more detail on them, just so Canadians are aware. We have something called the Canadian Sovereign AI Compute Strategy, which is a $2 billion investment in that Canadian businesses, innovators, and researchers have access to the compute capacity. And some people think compute capacity, it's kind of like the fuel that you need to fuel innovation and ingenuity. And that's really important. We've got our AI Compute Access Fund, where we have targeted companies to help support getting access to the compute they need for innovation. 95% of our economy is small businesses, and they need access to the tools, or they can't become productive. So that's helping. Our compute challenge is also helping build infrastructure. And we're supporting as well researchers. This year, we will be building a supercomputer that will be available for universities, researchers across the country, that will make us in the top class of the G7. And that really will allow us to remain at the forefront and the frontier of research. So there's a research side, there's an infrastructure side, there's support for businesses. And again, there'll be an aspect of training and skills, because that's really important. AI literacy, making sure that people are comfortable and understand this technology and have the skills to use it, critical.
Merci beaucoup. C'est intéressant ce que vous dites.
Thank you very much. This is quite interesting. You're talking about investing and making this available to universities. So do you have enough investment? Will you be able to keep making progress in the same direction? Because you just referred to a supercomputer and data center. Is there enough investment to keep that going?
It's in less than 10 seconds, Minister. Sorry.
We do have the AI Compute Challenge is a $700 million fund, and we've already funded that. So yes, we absolutely have the horsepower to get this up and running.
Wonderful. Thank you. Monsieur Thériault, pour 6 minutes. Commencez, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome, Minister. We are happy to see you after about 10 messages or invitations to appear before the committee. you were talking about the 11,300 testimonies or reactions or responses that fed into your strategy. Many experts, about 160, came together, signed a letter questioning this process. One of the issues was that as you accepted anonymous responses, this could have opened the door for people to use AI-generated content on this AI-related consultation process. So this was done in record time, and Jonathan Roberge is a professor at the Scientific Research Institute, and he says it's quite problematic to have dealt with the answers from the public in this way because there are biases that are introduced into the system, and it is really a closed loop situation, as it were. So what's your reaction, given that we don't even know that the input all comes from real individuals and the analysis done by AI, that it is not biased? Thank you for the very good question.
The task force, the 28 members who worked quickly, I want to thank the Canadians, over 11,000, who took the time to weigh in. That was part of it. Having an open and public consultation of this size is really important. And it generated genuine feedback that we have now posted, and people can see and get into this conversation to try to create as democratic an open and transparent process as possible. But I know the honourable member will understand that this technology moves at speed. And if we did not deploy some new efficiencies to help us analyze the 11,000 documents, it would have taken 10 months. And instead, or 8 to 10 months we heard, and instead of 8 months, we had help to make sure we could process in 8 days and meet with these members, the task force members. And I think it's very important to realize, if I may, one, speed matters, but thoroughness matters, and we will have other consultations, and they will continue.
Est-ce que vous avez utilisé, oui ou non, l'intelligence artificielle?
Did you use artificial intelligence to sift through the consultation material?
We used, for the 28 tasks, I just want to differentiate. Of course, for the 28 task force reports, we, of course, read those. I read those personally. My team read those personally. But yes, for the 11,000, we did develop, according to government regulations, to make it safe and secure, with the help of AI inside government, on a government system. We did use AI to help us go through, understand the data, and go through the 11,300 comments from people. Absolutely.
Donc, vous confirmez les préoccupations des experts.
So you do confirm the concerns expressed by experts who are saying that biases might have inserted themselves into the material. You have many experts, NGOs, and human rights defense groups have also spoken out against this procedure, and they are saying that there are many worries, as expressed by Canadians, when it comes to the dangers of artificial intelligence. And there is also urgency, a sense of urgency, rather, that is created given the tight deadlines on such a complicated topic, such an important topic as artificial intelligence. And there is also a predetermined framework with impacts on many economic sectors. So representatives of civil liberties and human rights working on artificial intelligence strategies have all spoken out against this procedure. What's your response? Thank you very much once again for the question.
I think the public would want the Minister of AI and Digital Innovation to be using the very tools that we're making sure are responsible. And we want a government that's innovative, but we want it to be responsible. I hear the members' concerns. The AI summaries, which helped us, were not determinative. Real humans engaged, obviously our teams engaged, but we want tools to help the government to work more efficiently. and to make sure that we're moving at speed so we don't fall behind. And so, again, I'm really proud of the fact that we're trying to find efficiencies, that something that could have taken 8 months, we could do in 8 days. But there's transparency. You can read all of those responses just to make sure you appreciate that. And finally, to make sure it is not pre-cooked, we have not launched our national AI strategy. We are still engaged in stakeholders. I had a stakeholder meeting just this morning on a phenomenal roundtable. I met with the national chief of the AFN on a roundtable on AI. I've had my provinces and territories just last week.
Excusez-moi, j'ai pas beaucoup de temps.
I apologize, I don't have a lot of time. How many of those 160 experts that have spoken out against this procedure, how many of them have you met?
And I'm not aware of the names of these 160, so I don't know because I don't know who you're talking about, to be candid. But we have been engaged in stakeholder relations roundtables. We're using the tools we've got. I'm meeting people to make sure that this national strategy reflects our values and protects our values in the best way possible. Merci.
Mr. Cooper, second round, 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. Minister, your government gave $240 million taxpayer dollars to Cohere as part of your government's so-called Canadian Sovereign Artificial Intelligence Compute Strategy to build an AI data center. We now know that Cohere has handed the same $240 million taxpayer dollars to a U.S.-based company, CoreWeave, to build and operate the data center. And so effectively, this is a $240 million handout, not to a Canadian company, but to a major U.S.-based tech company headquartered in New Jersey. Is it the case that in the lead-up to this $240 million handout, that your government knew that it was going straight into the pockets of a U.S. headquartered company?
Again, thanks for the question, and I just hope Canadians recognize that Cohere, we're very proud to have invested in Cohere. There are only 4 countries in the world that have a large language model companies. Those are the companies that are inventing the, people know the open AIs. There's the Americans, there's the Chinese. France has one and Canada has one. That company in the enterprise space is Cohere. They're built in Canada.
Respectfully, I asked a very specific question, and that is at the time and in the lead up to handing out $240 million taxpayer dollars to Cohere, was your government aware that it was going to go straight into the pockets of a U.S.-based company? Yes or no?
And again, let me just say we are very proud to have invested. Our investment was in a Canadian company, Cohere, which has Canadian jobs, Canadian IP, Canadian innovation. They're headquartered here. They're built here, and they're absolutely an important company to support.
And perhaps you're not answering my question because the answer is an embarrassing one for the government, and the answer is yes. An official from ISED, for example, is quoted in a December 2024 article in the Globe and Mail indicating that CoreWeave had been brought into the process and that the $240 million handout was made because your government saw it as an opportunity to act quickly. In other words, your government was more concerned with holding a press conference to look good rather than ensuring that $250 million taxpayer dollars would stay in Canada. Isn't that right?
Again, our goal is to invest in Canadian champions. We're not trying to tell companies how to innovate and do business. That's the job of the CEOs. What we want to do, and I know the member appreciates that, government's not telling people how to do business, but we are investing, and we are going to support a Canadian champion like Cohere, where they have Canadian IP, Canadian headquarters, and they're a company that we want in Canada. And I know the member would support that.
Government is truly interested in supporting Canadian champions. We know that there are several Canadian-owned companies that have comparable expertise and technology as CoreWeave. For example, eStructure has operated 14 data centers. They built them. If you're going to hand out $240 million tax dollars to build and operate a data center, which is exactly where this tax money went, why did your government fail to make as a condition of funding that the data center would be built and operated by a Canadian company?
You know, again, I appreciate the question. Our investment was in Cohere. Cohere is a nationally important company. We've, by the way, as a government, signed a memorandum of understanding with Cohere to make sure that we in the government are using Canadian technology. And we want to make sure that a company like Cohere, who has world-class technology, are employing Canadians, stay here. I will say, though, that you also mentioned, eStructure, Denver. There are also some other great Canadian companies.
Minister,
have ways to...
Minister, here's the bottom line. The bottom line is your government handed out $240 million tax dollars with no strings attached. And worse than that, your government knew all along that the money was going straight to a U.S. company. It's the straight-up $250 million subsidization of a U.S. company courtesy of Canadian taxpayers, and it didn't have to be that way.
Again, we're proud to invest in Cohere. They built the data center here in Canada, but I'm not here to tell CEOs how to build a business. These guys this is a unicorn. This is a great company, and I'm not going to talk down Cohere. We're very proud of a government to make sure that we are supporting one of the world-class companies. And it's a matter of sovereignty, and I know the member is seized with sovereignty, as are we. We want to make sure that Canadians are using Canadian Foundation AI models, not American ones, not Chinese ones, Canadian ones. Cohere is that.
Ms. Church, 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Minister, welcome, Deputy. And just picking up on that last exchange, I think that it is really important that Canada is concerned about its sovereignty in this area and in marshalling and supporting the researchers and the industries that we have that are planting a flag for us internationally in an industry that is going to very much shape our future in ways that we are just beginning to grapple with. And Minister, I also met with a terrific organization this morning, the Coalition of Innovation Leaders Advancing Respect, CELAR, who is in town. They represent leading companies, educational institutions, community organizations, employers, and they are setting out with a mission to equip 100,000 Canadians with AI and digital skills in the coming years. And it just goes to show how much this sector, again, whether we like it or not, as much as we hope to be ready for it or not, it is coming, it is upon us, and we have to be smart and strategic and sovereign in how we approach it. My question maybe to you today is, how are we doing on AI infrastructure investments in Canada? And are we doing enough to address the infrastructure challenges that might be faced by this sector, by researchers in it, and by companies looking to grow?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I'm sure the meeting that my honourable colleague had, Chair, was interesting. Let me just say something about skills and talent, because in a sense that's another form of infrastructure. You've got to have the intellectual property, the IP, and you've got to churn out the research in order to build these companies. I will say we're very proud in the last budget, as the member knows, that there's a $1.7 billion talent attraction investment to recruit 1,000 of the world's top world-class researchers and their labs to get the doctoral fellows and to support the universities. That matters because, many of these companies that start, they're spin-off on incubators. If you go to Waterloo, if you go to Sherbrooke, if you go to University of Toronto, if you go to University of Alberta, UBC, our campuses are churning out some fantastic companies. It might be worth mentioning as well to the member that we have 800,000 people working in the digital sector in Canada. That is the fastest growing part of our economy. So investing in the sector matters. In the AI sector alone, for some perspective, we have about 3,000 pure play AI companies right now. So these are people starting companies, not just, we mentioned Cohere. There are literally thousands and thousands of companies doing things in healthcare, transport, agriculture. I was at University of Guelph, and the use of AI to help grow food for farmers here. In the healthcare sector, to cut wait times, to help surgeries, to reduce second surgeries and brain surgery. The technology is fantastic, and it's going to be transformative. That's really important. So we've got to invest in that kind of infrastructure, and we're doing that. We've got our 3 research chairs, our Canadian Institute of Health Research that's doing that, our National Science and Engineering Research Council. Those are really important. So there's that kind of infrastructure that we're investing in. But we're also investing, as I say, in building the actual, this year you will see we're investing in our compute challenge to build data centers that are sovereign, to make sure that we have the infrastructure. I will just say, I know there's some people have some concerns about that. I was at a data center by a Canadian company outside of Quebec City, in Lévis, a great company called Qscale. They built a $1.2 billion data center that is about 140 megawatts. Clean energy. In terms of water use, some concerns about that. It is what's called a closed loop system. In other words, they cycle the same water through. They're not reusing water. Many of these data centers are also about to capture the heat for greenhouse growth because it generates heat. So there are ways to build this that generates innovation, that is very efficient use of water, efficient use of energy, and drives innovation. That was, by the way, all private investment. So this is happening. So the infrastructure is being built, but we have to make sure that once the infrastructure is built, people trust. And I'm just going to return to that. The trust is important. And I often say technology moves at the speed of innovation, but citizens move at the speed of trust. People have to trust this stuff. They're not going to use it. So that's really important.
Thank you, Minister. Monsieur Thériault pour 5.
5 minutes. Merci.
5 minutes. Thank you. Minister? Companies have said that artificial general intelligence can surpass human intelligence. There is somewhat of a consensus that has formed in this committee where we differentiate, while experts differentiate between artificial intelligence, specialized artificial intelligence that is promising, that could be used in the medical field or for economic growth, but there is also AGI, artificial general intelligence, which could be problematic because if it's not controlled, if it's not kept in check. So, Minister, you have Nobel Prize winners and CEOs and leaders from countries such as Anthropic, Google, DeepMind, who are warning us that a intelligent AGI could pose threats for humanity. So what measures are you taking for that? That's a very important question.
That of our 3 national institutes that we have, Vector in Toronto, Geoffrey Hinton, he's one of the godfathers of AI, and many Canadians will say, oh, yes, Dr. Hinton has warned about that. He's won the Nobel Prize. He's concerned about that. Yoshua Bengio, who won the Turing Prize, who runs, obviously, who's in our Mila Institute, part of our AI safety ecosystem and our safety institute. I've spoken to them a lot. I would say that Rich Sutton, who runs AMI in our Machine Learning and National Institute, he has a slightly different view. And so there's not a lot necessarily consensus, but there is real questions and concerns. I've read it about what artificial general intelligence would be, and people ask me a lot about it. And so we are I think our job is not to be cheerleaders for this or doomsayers, but to find a pragmatic way to use this safely. That is why, by the way, we do have an AI Safety Institute, and that is why we will have legislation on privacy and data to keep Canadians. Yeah.
Certains suggèrent que le Canada soit...
Some say that Canada could be a global leader in terms of the effort to avoid these problems. I mean, maybe there isn't a consensus in the way you described it, but there's a consensus saying that there is a risk, and you have more than 300 people, including the big names in this field. So where we don't have an agreement, we don't seem to see eye to eye, is that we're playing Russian roulette with a couple of bullets in the chamber. And this fall, there was a cyber attack which was prevented without human intervention. So the Government of Canada's cyber security strategies were formulated before this incident. So what is the government doing in concrete terms to prepare Canada, concretely speaking, to these types of autonomous, large-scale, AI-backed cyber attacks, which was explained to us here at committee?
Concerns are shared by all of us. We all have real concerns about any abusive use and potential uses. This is why protection is so important. On cybersecurity, let me just give you, as you know, our Public Safety Minister, Ananda Sangri, has introduced Bill C-8 that fortifies our cybersecurity system and responses. So that's really important. And I would urge members who are deeply concerned, as we all should be, about cybersecurity, to support that piece of legislation, because I think it's really important. Protecting our digital infrastructure, I will say, one of the things that is important is concerns about cyber attacks that could breach current systems. And this is why we've invested in quantum technology, because, as you know, quantum computing poses a genuine potential threat to, and so we just in December launched our Canadian Quantum Program to keep Canada's key, we've got 4 phenomenal Canadian companies here, to keep them in Canada. Nord Quantique au Quebec, that's one of them, Photonic, Xanadu, because we need to make sure that Canadians own the potential to protect ourselves from cyber attacks and have quantum level security. And that's why we launched the Quantum Canadian Champions Program, for that reason.
Mais croyez-vous qu'il faille effectivement
But quickly, please. Do you believe, as some of these experts, Ben Gio and others, who are advocating for a halt, a pause in terms of the development of AGI, do you adopt that same idea? Will you work with other countries to make sure that there are structures in place so that these limits, as it were, will not be surpassed by AGI?
Sir.
We have invested $50 million in the AI Safety Institute, working with Joshua Bengio, who won the Turing Prize, who's very aware of that, and safety is top mind in our national strategy. So I very much appreciate the question.
38 words, thank you. Monsieur Hardy, pour 5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le ministre, d'être avec nous. Je m'en vais
Thank you,
dans...
Minister, for being with us. I will take you down a different path. You were saying that Canada's plan is AI for everyone, no matter where they live and what kind of money they make, etc., and having it safe and available to Canadians. And the use of AI in Canada is getting bigger and bigger. So it requires more data centers. So am I right in thinking that data centers are also part of your plan?
The member's right. Part of our build pillar will include supporting some sovereign data centers, absolutely.
Vous avez en tête de bâtir de plus en plus de
So
centres.
you are planning to build more and more data centers. When we look at recent data, the energy requirements are going up by about 30% because of these data centers, and by 2030 it will have doubled the energy needs. I met with a Quebec company in the sector, in the energy sector, and they referred to the cold periods that we had, and they said that there was difficulty just warming up people's homes. But are you aware of the energy needs of the data centers given these challenges and limitations? Who will provide the energy so that these data centers can be set up?
The member's asking an absolutely crucial question, and I really appreciate it because energy is uniquely tied to this technology. I will say that energy use in general, the electrification of the world is happening. And this is why, as our government, through our major projects office, we are investing in building out new grids. And I also just want to point out that it is the provinces and the regulators in the provinces that that are in charge of how they allocate energy on the grid. So I will say that I've spoken in my meeting with the provinces and territories a lot about the energy use and how each province is allocating energy. And in the province of Ontario, I'll give you an example. We are now building small modular reactors, just starting that in Ontario because they need more electricity generation. Not all for AI, of course. AI might be 2%, some experts say 2% of our energy needs, but nonetheless, we are very mindful, and the provinces and the regulators are mindful, that any use of electricity doesn't get downloaded on ratepayers. They're mindful of water usage. They're mindful of heat capture. And they're mindful to make sure that it doesn't also, but yet we don't want to constrain innovation. We don't want to stop it.
Parce que quelque part, votre plan de bâtir plus.
So your plan to build more data centers, I mean, the energy generation capacity will play into that. If you cannot meet the demand, then the price will have to go up and people will have to pick up the tab. But if we are headed towards building more data centers, it's either citizens who will pay more for their electricity bill or companies who will have to pay more for electricity. So how do you assess the situation? Because if the companies end up paying more, I mean, will they be interested in setting up shop here? Or is it, if it's the citizens, it's another problem. What's the strategy for that?
Have regulators, and the federal government doesn't regulate electricity allocations of megawatts or gigawatts. So, for example, every province has a different landscape here. Alberta, for example, AESO, their regulator, recently released 1.2 gigawatts of power tied to the grid. They have natural gas, and they believe that's a really important investment, and they don't think that will impact their ratepayers. BC, just in the last week, also has just released about 300 megawatts of power tied to the grid. Others will incentivize companies, again, not through the federal government, to build what's called behind the fence. They'll build data centers not tied to the grid, so you'll have to bring your own. It's like BYOP, bring your own power.
Le point, je pense qu'on se comprend, c'est que d'une manière.
I think the point I'm trying to make is that one way or another, the large projects will have to accelerate in order to supply what you are suggesting to us. It's one thing to make announcements, but you have to have the concrete measures in place if you want these projects to go ahead. If you are going to build more data centers, you have to accelerate this procedure. So one way or another, these calculations must have been made. So by when will you be able to deliver these contracts and produce the capacity, or will it be the citizens who will have to pick up the tab? Because at the end of the day, you will have to build this, and these projects need the energy. Mr. Hardy, your time is up.
The national strategy will have more details on that, but again, we are mindful. This is not done on the back of ratepayers, but that is the provinces that we're working closely with to make sure that this industry is built in collaboration with the provinces, and to make sure that it's done transparently and efficiently.
Okay, Monsieur Sarré pour 5.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for being with us today and for the answers you've been providing. You have really shed light on concerns and questions of committee members. My questions will hopefully serve the purpose of reassuring people who are tuning in. I believe that we all share the same concerns with regard to what the risks of AI could be. I'll try to group my questions into distinct groups. So, first off, Canada has always had the capacity of attracting talent in many fields, in IT especially. Does your strategy have a component which will attract IT talent and experts in this field of AI?
Yeah, merci encore fois pour la question.
Thank you once again for the question.
And Chair, the member, my honourable colleague, understands this industry extremely well. He's very well versed in it, and I appreciate the question on talent. We have to build on our foundation of talent. That's the talent attraction strategy. There will be more elements to make sure that we capture the talent. Look, there's opportunities out there. There's opportunities. Some fantastic programmers that can't get into some other countries right now are looking for a place to build that is safe, that protects their values, that they can have the security, and we're attracting. This is a place to build. So we're absolutely doing that. We are investing in our talent, and that's the $1.7 billion is part of it to recruit the 1,000 world-class researchers. That's really part of it. But I should say we're also creating talent here. I mean, this is the one thing that we shouldn't sell ourselves short, and maybe Canadians don't celebrate our own successes. Not just our three institutes, Mila, Montréal, Vector, Toronto, Amy, Edmonton. Il y a beaucoup de universités aussi that
there are also many universities.
University of Waterloo is among the very best in the world. Simon Fraser, among the very best in the university in the world. Sherbrooke, Université de Laval, Université of Montreal, McGill. We are producing more talent, engineers. But I should say it's not just people who understand the tech. We need Canadians from all sectors to understand. And so some like to talk about STEM, right? The science, technology, and engineering and maths. But there's also STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, because there are remarkable. We need to make sure that AI for all means that all of these folks have the literacy to use these tools. And the last thing I'll say is the good news is these tools are getting a little easier to use. I'll use a kind of cool tech term, and maybe it's called the vibe coding. So it used to be that you needed a real technology degree to be able to really use these tools to produce some benefits. Now it's so easy to use the interfaces. They call it vibe coding. People that may not have a tech background can use it for their companies. So it's becoming more inclusive. We got to make sure it's safe.
Yeah. Merci beaucoup pour votre réponse.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think it's quite reassuring to hear these words. It also ties into how competitive our ecosystem could be. So, you know, Minister, that AI is getting better and better exponentially. But I would like to know, maybe give you the chance to speak to the issue of sovereignty in general, because our Prime Minister refers quite often to digital sovereignty, which is, of course, key and very important for all of us. How can the government reassure Canadians when it comes to our digital sovereignty, all the while negotiating with a southern neighbor, unfortunately turning more and more hostile?
Merci encore pour la question.
Thank you once again for the question.
The first aspect is making sure that Canadians' data and privacy are safe. I mean, let's be clear. People who are watching this, they want to make sure their kids' data is safe. They want to make sure they're protected from deepfakes and protected from malign forces, you know, people that are trying to undermine our democracy. And so one of the reasons why we will be tabling legislation to update our privacy laws, you know, they're still functioning and Canadians' data is safe, but to make sure that we have the tools to protect Canadians' privacy. So we talked earlier, and I think one of the other honourable members here raised a good question about deepfakes, and it's a good one. We've got the legislation that
Gonna
the
need you to
Justice
wrap it up,
Minister.
Minister. Gonna need you to wrap
And
it up.
I'll have legislation on privacy and data, and there'll be, sovereignty is a form of safety. We need to be under Canadian law to keep Canadians safe.
Thank you. Merci, Monsieur Say. Mr. Barrett for 5.
So when we spoke last, you referenced Bill C-16, and I want to start by identifying what I hope is some common ground on a very important issue. I'm hearing about it all the time. I just as a Canadian, as a concerned citizen, as a parent, I think this is very important that we get our arms around this thing. And so, along with my colleagues, and I think uniformly with members of the government caucus, support banning deepfakes of intimate partners. This especially protects women from non-consensual intimate images being created and shared online. We think that there should be mandatory reporting of child sexual abuse material because this is going to help keep our children safe. So we have agreement on that. This is included in Bill C-16. But also included in Bill C-16 are provisions that deal with something that your government would know that the official opposition does not support. And specifically, that is a provision that allows judges to ignore mandatory prison sentences for serious crimes like human trafficking, aggravated sexual assault with a gun, and violent firearms offenses. So we have an issue that we know we don't agree on, and we have an issue we know that we agree on. Minister, this is a really important time for our country, and I'm looking to see if in the spirit of collaboration, if you would say, yeah, we agree on the things that we agree on, let's split this bill. The government can find another dance partner on the provisions that the official opposition that disagrees with, and let's deal with what we could probably pass, unanimously in the House to protect vulnerable people, to protect victims, to ensure their dignity. Would you support splitting Bill C-16?
First, can I have just 10 seconds just to say, I know, Mr. Chair, this member is a father, served the country. I'm a father. So when it comes to talking about protecting, I know this member feels it personally. I respect that, and I always thank him for his service. And we agree personally and professionally that protecting Canadians is our number one responsibility. And let me just say that the aspects of the non-consensual sharing of sexualized deepfakes is a disgusting practice. It harms women, it harms vulnerable people, and the fact that we have shared agreement on this is absolutely critical. Now, I know the Justice Minister is in charge of this bill. I'm not going to negotiate on behalf of the Justice Minister, but I will say this. One, I absolutely appreciate the open and transparent and good faith negotiation. I know there are always elements of disagreement and agreement on some aspects of the bill. I can't negotiate for the Justice Minister on a bill, but I will say, I share your concern and your need to protect. But I will say that part of deepfakes will be captured in C-16, the sharing of non-consensual sexualized imagery. Part of that will be, I hope, captured in the privacy legislation because there's an element of deepfakes there that we got to protect citizens from and consumers from. And when we are looking at various things there very closely and things that your party, or rather, sorry, Mr. Chair, things that the honourable member's party have raised, things like the right to deletion and other things. And I know that my colleague, Mark Miller, the Heritage Minister, is also looking at harms when it relates to social media. So look, we have a suite of protection mechanisms, and I know that we're working closely on that, and I appreciate the spirit of good faith. But I hope we can act fast on making sure that we criminalize the sharing of non-consensual sexualized imagery.
Okay. I have 30 seconds, so I can't get into another question. Will you undertake to share this feedback, to share this directly with the minister on behalf of myself and my Conservative colleagues? Will you undertake to share that collaborative offer?
Absolutely. I always appreciate the dialogue from the honourable member, and I will absolutely share that with the Justice Minister. Appreciate the question.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Mr. Grant, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your hospitality to the Ethics Committee for allowing me to be here today, and thank you, Minister, for your presentation and the answers that you have given. I think I'm the lone British Columbia MP around here, yes, and I thank you for the shout-out to UBC and SFU and the work that they're doing, but I do know that, building homegrown talent is one thing, but you talked about AI workforce and talent attraction. Why is attracting international AI talent important for Canada's research ecosystem and essential pillar to the pan-Canadian AI strategy?
A great question, and I like the honourable member always champions his region, which is great. And there are the ecosystem, or the businesses that are coming out of Vancouver and the entire region are phenomenal, especially in things like the life sciences, and also, frankly, a magnet for talent. And we need talent. And the International Talent Attraction Strategy Action Plan is really about reforming the immigration system to meet new labor market needs. And that's what we're trying to do, because this technology is evolving, and we need skills, and we need folks to come here. And the purpose of the talent attraction, and the purpose of the accelerated processing, and the purpose of all that is to attract investment to Canada, to attract talent to Canada, to start their business in Canada, to come to Canada to invest here, to start a business here, to bring their intellectual property here. Look, there's been a long time where Canada, sadly, was the farm team, where we had the talent, we did the great research, and then, maybe it was access to capital, but folks were leaving. Now they're coming. And we have a system to attract brain gain, not brain drain. That is the goal of the mission. And we need it because it's a very competitive landscape. And, the Prime Minister talks about this moment that we're in, a political realignment happening at the same time as a technological revolution. And if we seize that, get new partners, expand our trade, have pathways to permanent residency for people who are investing in this country, absolutely, that's a way to turn this into an opportunity.
So just expanding on that, what new measures are needed to help talented researchers come to Canada and stay?
Well, one of them is a talent attraction. One of them is our CFAR chairs. One of them is is the ability to start a company here. The honourable member knows our budget. We have the productivity super deduction, which means, and this sounds, I don't want to get too wonky, but these are moments that I think all honourable members from any party will appreciate. Our marginal effective tax rate now, after this budget, and we hope it passes the budget implementation bill, let's pass that, would make that lower than it is in the United States after their one big, beautiful bill. What that means in real terms is this is a good place to invest. This is a good place to start a business. This is a good place for talent to come. This is a safe place for talent to come. There's also talent that you can hire here based out of our universities. So attracting talent, that's one way to do it. When you start a company here, you can get a shred credit. So that means you can actually hire, and we've reformed that system. There's incentives for small businesses to hire and to use those credits to hire innovative employees. And we're helping them. So there's lots of mechanisms to attract talent here.
But given recent changes, what is the government doing to ensure top global talent can come here quickly and contribute to our research ecosystem?
Again, I'm really happy to say that I know my colleagues at IRCC will be delivering the accelerated processing for recruitment talent. And then making sure that there's a pathway to PR to make sure that talent can come here. And again, this is why the Minister of Immigration, working closely, knowing our file, is working so closely, getting our levels plan done, getting control over our immigration system, and making sure that it is used for the benefit of all Canadians to invest here in Canada.
How much time do I have? 30 seconds. Oh, really quickly then, I'm just going to go. I'm a father of two young, well, not young anymore, a 17 and 15-year-old. My son's about to go to university, and you said AI is the future. It's here now. What can he expect if he wants to go into this? How can he be supported?
You know, the best advice I give to my kids, and I think to everyone, is a good education. Things that the technology is changing, but investing in a good education and making sure they have the skills to adapt, absolutely crucial. But I know the honourable member's a good dad, and he's got those kids done right.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, I think the best advice that we've got as a committee is when we did our misinformation and disinformation study, which used to be known as lying. We had a witness come before us and said, assume everything online is fake until it's otherwise proven to be true. No, I'm not looking for a response. I'm just saying that we've had a witness, we've had witnesses come before us and state that. So that's how the state of deep fakes, AI, and all that stuff has evolved. So anyways, Minister, I want to thank you for being here.
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Oui, Monsieur Thériault.
Point of order, Chair. Well, there was a unanimous motion, and the motion referred to 2 hours. With the minister, would he stick around for a number of other questions? Well, we sent the motion that was adopted by the committee, and the clerk communicated with the Parliamentary Affairs Office. But the minister's office said that the minister was going to be available for only 1 hour, despite the motion adopted by the majority of the committee. But if you want to ask the minister, or I can ask the minister if he can stay with us for another hour, I would be in agreement with that, because I know that there are many members with many questions, or at least finish the hour that we just started, so that we can get another round in.
That's why this committee to have you here for 2 hours. We asked you, your office, on 11 occasions to come before this committee. This was the date that was accommodated. But the question that Mr. Thériault has is, if you're available, can you stay? I'm going to leave that with you. In a second, please.
We had scheduled an hour here, and I'm, by the way, very happy to appear here. On my schedule, it was scheduled for an hour, and I unfortunately have other events, but I have very much appreciated the questions today, and thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Madame Lapointe? Okay. All right, I'm going to suspend for a bit. Je suis désolé, Monsieur Thériault. I'm going to suspend until we get...
Mr. Thériault.
Thank you. continuing our study challenges posed by artificial intelligence and its regulations. Before I start, well, you're going to be up first, Mr. Majumdar. So before I start and we start resuming questions, I just want you to know that my understanding is that the House leaders did not discuss this week at any point the need for concurrence for this committee to study the lobbying report. So I'm asking members, and it's just a simple UC motion that is presented in the House among agreement of all parties, to give us the authority to do the study on the lobbying report. So I'm asking committee members to push their House leadership teams to make sure that they do that. Okay? Thank you. Mr. Majumdar, you have the floor. You have 6 minutes. Go ahead, proceed with your questions.
I'd like to move a motion.
Okay. Mr. Majumdar is going to move a motion. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry, is this related to the motion that is on notice?
I believe so.
Okay, go ahead.
That having regard for the recent reporting that characterized the state of access to information in Canada as, quote, dismal, end quote, and noted that the Privy Council office is, quote, among the worst offenders, end quote, and having regard for the Treasury Board Secretariat guidelines for the public service that allow for the deletion of instant messages after 15 days and emails after 30 days, the committee undertake a 2-meeting study on the state of access to information in Canada, and for the purposes of this study, A, invite Carolyn Maynard, Information Commissioner of Canada, for 1 hour. B, invite Leslie Weir, Librarian Archivist of Canada, for 1 hour. C, invite the appropriate officials from the Privy Council office for 1 hour. D, invite the appropriate officials from the Treasury Board Secretariat for 1 hour. And E, at the conclusion of this study, the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. I'd like to provide a copy of this to the clerk if it's of use.
Okay, it's already been distributed to members. The motion is duly moved. The notice was on. Is there any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any discussion. Do I have consensus among the committee members to deal with that motion? We do?
No, Mr. Speaker, I think we'd like to, Mr. Chair, I think we'd like to propose some amendments to the motion, at least for consideration. In particular, I think that Mr. Chair, sorry, it's Thursday afternoon. I love these new committee times. We would like to propose striking having regard for the recent reporting that characterized the state of access to information in Canada as dismal, and noted that the Privy Council office is among the worst offenders, and having regard for the Treasury Board Secretariat guidelines for the public service that allow for the deletion of instant messages after 15 days and emails after 30 days, adding instead in its place, in light of recent reporting on the state of access to information in Canada, comma, the committee undertake a 2-meeting study on the state of access to information with particular attention to the deletion policies for instant messages and emails, and, comma, for the purpose of this study, we invite Caroline Maynard, Information Commissioner, Leslie Weir, it's fine, but at the end of the motion, at the conclusion of this study, the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House and request a government response.
So I'm going to take a quick suspension on that because I need the clerk to ensure that she has the proper wording. If you can share that with her, and then we'll make sure that we share that with the committee members, okay? Okay, so I'm going to suspend for a couple minutes. Let's do this quickly, please. Okay, suspended. Call the meeting back to order. The amendment as proposed by Ms. Church has been sent to everybody's email. So we're on the amendment. Any questions on the amendment at all? I don't see any. So we're going to, do I have unanimous consent on the amendment, or do you want to vote? No. Okay, so let's go to a vote, please. Okay, on the amendment. Madam Clerk, take the roll.
So the vote is on the amendment, as you've seen, by Ms. Church. Ms. Church. Yes. Madame Lapointe. Oui. Mr. Grant.
Yes.
Mr. Sari.
Yes.
Mr. Majumdar.
No.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Monsieur Hardy.
No.
Monsieur Thériault.
No.
4-4, 4-4.
Okay, so my vote is no, Madam Clerk. So the amendment is defeated. We're on the motion of Mr. Majumdar. No discussion on the motion. Ms. Church?
Well, Mr. Chair, I mean, I am disappointed that the amendment was rejected, but I would urge committee members to consider a few things. First of all, I think if we do take this seriously as a study that the committee wants to weigh in on, I think it's important that we do ensure that there's a government response to any study that this committee does. I think that's an important part of any motion and any study that we do as a committee. If we are going to take the time to assess access to information and to encourage the appropriate interventions by the commissioner, the librarian and archivist, and others, I think it's not only important that we are reporting our findings to the House, but that the government actually has an opportunity to respond. Second, I do think that it is worth ensuring that on the record in this committee that we recognize that part of the rationale for an amendment was to ensure that we were not misleading Canadians here with Treasury Board Secretariat guidelines that are misstated in the body of this motion. Even in the last hour of this committee's work, we've heard about the different types of guidelines that exist in record keeping within government, within the public service, the difference between records that constitute a permanent record, a record that encapsulates a decision within government, and a record, for example, that is transitory. And unfortunately, the motion as it's worded now, I think serves to substantially mislead Canadians on guidelines for the public service that in no way, shape, or form demand the deletion of emails after 30 days. There is a lack of nuance to the way that this motion is recorded currently to reflect that. And I just think that that does an injustice to Canadians. I think it does an injustice to the House. This committee, we have been through this before as a team of parliamentarians concerned about access and ethics when we have presented incorrect information to the full House of Commons that has reverberated in the work of this committee. So I would urge us to recall the lessons of this committee's work before the holiday break and think carefully about how we present a motion to the House in a study that touches, I think, an appropriately serious issue like this one. So, Mr. Chair, I would urge us to reconsider, perhaps as I've moved a motion. I don't know if other colleagues might consider further amendments, but I would say that I think it's very important that we add a government response here and consider rewording that first paragraph of the motion.
So I appreciate the intervention. I just want to clarify as well that regardless of whether the amendment was accepted or not, any time that the committee does adopt the report, we will ask at that time whether the committee does in fact want a response from the government. So we will have that opportunity when and if the report is adopted by the committee. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. Monsieur Sarré, I saw tu l'avais.
Oui, tout à fait. Sur l'amendement et sur la motion
Yes,
elle-même.
on the motion and the amendment, Mr. Chair, I will come back to something I have said at numerous occasions. Our role here at the committee, our non-partisan role, is to relay the correct information and to reassure Canadians that our government and public service, civil service, are doing the right thing. And this way, as my colleague has been saying, we might risk misleading Canadians. Just think about a researcher who relies on this work and uses this erroneous information. So it pushes us to vote against the motion, but of course you have the majority, so we know it will pass. But it will have the effect that a majority of the Ethics Committee members will be saying things that are not 100% correct or accurate. So we are here to reassure Canadians, to show them that we are doing the necessary work to relay the correct information to them as a function of the government. So once again, I'm calling out to you as the chair, and I fully support my colleague, Ms. Church's comments on this. This text concludes language that is not completely accurate.
I appreciate that. There are no other speakers on the list, so I am going to call the vote on the motion. And we don't have unanimous consent, so I assume. So I'm going to call for a recorded vote. Madam Clerk, go ahead, please.
Donc, le vote est sur la motion proposée par Monsieur Majumdar.
The vote is on the motion as proposed by Mr. Majumdar.
Madame Lapointe. No. Mr. Grant.
No.
Monsieur Sari.
No.
Mr. Majumdar.
Yes.
Mr. Cooper.
Yes.
Monsieur Hardy.
Oui.
Monsieur Thériault.
Oui.
4-4, 4-4.
Okay, so my vote is yes. Results?
He's a 5 and he's a 4.
Okay, the motion is adopted. We have about 20 minutes left with the officials. We've got a hard stop at 5:30. Thank you for your patience, gentlemen. Mr. Majumdar, I'm going to go to you for 5 minutes, please. We're going to have 3 5-minute rounds with officials. Go ahead, Mr. Majumdar.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome officials to this committee. It's a pleasure to see you here, and thank you for the work you do day to day in a field that's largely ungoverned and regulatory world that's not really well written. I wanted to talk for a minute about accountability, not censorship by proxy, especially when it comes to AI. I was curious, there are, without ironclad free speech protections, a lot of regulatory watermarking can be technically useful, but they can also become tools for preemptive censorship. And in this, I mean it the way that the AI governance frameworks we see coming out of the UN, the ITU, or any body where China or Russia have a veto power, I'm very skeptical of the kind of regulations that are proposed for sovereign regions to adopt. So I'm curious, what's your perspective on, establishing binding red lines against authoritarian AI practices while rejecting EU-style precautionary regulation that actually kills innovation?
Merci, Monsieur le Président, pour la question. And it's a really interesting one that I'll try and tackle in a couple of ways. One is, I think it's super important that we recognize the import at this time of pursuing research into AI safety and evaluation mechanisms to be able to understand the underlying mechanisms and potential for harms within algorithms. That's at the heart of the Canadian AI Safety Institute. That's at the heart of our work with the Canadian Institutes for Advanced Research in their role in the Canadian AI Safety Institute to be able to advance the science that's helping us know how it is that actual AI algorithms and advanced AI systems are actually playing out and to help create evaluative mechanisms that are actually going to assist developers and deployers in being able to test effectively what the potential vulnerabilities and potential harms are related to their systems. So that's kind of one important piece. The second is, I think it's super important that we also continue to advance international efforts in the ways in which that standardization can actually start to assist, provide certainty to industry in ensuring that there's actual mechanisms that they can readily tell their users and their customers that they are complying with effective mechanisms to ensure that they are not actually deploying systems that have the capacity to harm their customers. And I think Canada is participating in a number of those efforts, whether it's within our standards bodies themselves or whether it's, again, within the Safety Institute and some of our research community who are pursuing some of that effort. And then I think it's increasingly important that we also then set out some of the ways in which industry can actually commit themselves to being able to do some of that work in their own development and deployment. And that's where the voluntary code for industry on the use of generative AI is extraordinarily helpful in that it provides assurances to the market, but also to industry to be able to assess whether or not they've met the basic terms by which they are doing things like ensuring transparency as it relates to the development and the uses of their algorithms, does work as it relates to things like red teaming, so actually testing whether or not they know the potential outcomes, and then also creating mechanisms for some sort of feedback mechanism when there are actual risks and harms that are adjudicated. So I'd say that's one of the ways in which I think we're going to be able to find that space. The other that I'll just briefly mention is I think there's an assumption that the only way in which we're going to regulate or get to good outcomes in artificial intelligence is through generalized AI legislation or generalized AI regulation. And I think that's an open debate. But I think one of the things that it misses is that there's actual extraordinary room within sector-based and existing verticals of regulatory efforts to be able to get at AI potential harms, whether that's capacities for our medical device examiners to be able to know how to effectively interpret the safety of a medical device that utilizes artificial intelligence, or whether that's the use of our private sector privacy laws to ensure that when an automated decision-making system makes a decision on the basis of someone's personal information, that they get to know which aspects of personal information were used in that decision.
Thank you. With the time left, I asked the question because I also think carefully about how Hamas, Iran, and Qatar spend tens of millions on TikTok and Instagram influence operations. And we're not entirely confident to see how these algorithms are multiplying things that radicalize aspects of Canadian society, distort truth or history. So particularly in the information space, how do we establish a system that actually respects free speech but exposes that in our market we have, in our information market of ideas, we have some very bad actors that are trying to deeply polarize our communities, go after minorities, and make life intolerable for people.
Okay, so sorry, Mr. Majumdar, we're over the 5. I actually miscalculated. We can have 6-minute rounds, so you've got a half a minute to answer that, sir. That's my point. Okay.
Thanks. Super quick. A couple of ways that come to mind as I think about that question. One is I think there's a number of civil society efforts underway to be able to look at verifiability of information and providing for mechanisms to be able to assist people in knowing the provenance of the information that they're looking at and how it can be authorized. The other is that we do have concerns about certain actors and their role in our systems. And one of my other jobs is as deputy director, or as the director of investments under the Investment Canada Act, and we have guidance, for instance, on things like electronic media and video games, where we have asserted guidelines about the ways in which those can be used for other purposes.
Thank you, sir. Madame Lapointe, pour 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much for being with us today. This allows us to make progress on our study. Well, with regard to the issue of artificial intelligence, I have ecosystem-related questions. How does our government make sure that our AI research ecosystem remains competitive at the international level? Thank you, Chair, for the question. For me, it's all about stabilizing and ensuring the continuity of these research systems in Canada, because Canada already has great foundation in this area. Canada was really part of the creation of these technologies with Jeff Hinton, Yoshua Benja, Rich Sutton, and others were highly and deeply implicated. And we have 130 researchers who are here thanks to the research chair having been established in 2017. It's not just 130 researchers, but they each have their labs and their students, so it really is an ecosystem. Now, the opportunity is about how the government wants to keep building and continuing the success, because the world really is competing and racing against each other in this domain. So now the strategy might rely on continuing to invest to keep these research chairs. And we're talking about $1.7 billion to attract talent. There are also efforts underway to establish links between the community at large and research and industry. So this is where Canada wants to focus. So with regard to the $1.7 billion to attract talent, have we been able to start doing that, attracting talent? Thank you for the question. While universities are working hard with the Research Council to make sure that these programs are quickly deployed, I have had conversations with vice chairs for research from different universities, and some of them have taken initial steps with good results, but we're not at the end of this process, and the Research Council will continue to work on this, but first signs are very positive. Perfect. It's good to know. You were saying that 130 researchers were started work in this area. So are there new additions to this group? Well, the CFAR program continues throughout the announcement of the strategy. And we had unbelievably interesting participation in healthcare, in energy, in manufacturing. So very interesting areas where AI can be used throughout our economy. Thank you. Thank you. This is all very interesting. How will the government protect our sovereignty? The minister briefly touched upon this on digital sovereignty while negotiating with our neighbor to the south. We're having some difficulties with them, as you know. So how can we make sure that we remain sovereign, digitally speaking? Well, digital sovereignty is very sensitive, and it's a complicated issue as well, because when you look at the value chain in AI, a country like Canada cannot have all the links in the value chain on its own, because large chip manufacturers are American companies as we speak, and most of these are manufactured in Taiwan. So it's hard for us here in Canada to have a champion in this particular field. So for the government and for the department, it's about putting forward a strategy to cover the value chain in the realm of AI, and it has components that have to do with the infrastructure and with production, but we also rely on our comparative advantages in research, and we have vertical areas such as AI and health, AI and energy. So in such fields, when there's capacity, when we have capacity, we are working on these areas, and we are reaching out to researchers and third parties to come and do this work in Canada. Well, I know that there's a lot of work in the field of photonics. You have University of Sherbrooke, and here in Ottawa as well, there are companies. They showed me a piece of equipment, for instance, that go into the databases. But with regard to the chips, these are not manufactured in Canada. You said there isn't we don't have an at-scale manufacturer here in Canada, but there is a CPFC, Canadian Photonics Production Center. They use different methods of manufacturing, quite interesting, to build capacity here in Canada. Thank you very much. This is all very interesting. Mr. Theriault, 6 minutes to finish. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Shan, this might be an interesting question, but there's a new Department of Artificial Intelligence. What's your background? My background? In political science initially at Waterloo University. Then I did my master's and doctorate, PhD in social policy at Oxford University. But over my career, I worked in many interesting fields in social policies, and I helped create the first AI regulation zone in Canada, and I've also been part of a global partnership in the field of artificial intelligence. I do understand now the connection. Now, you were here and you heard my questions. There are many people who are warning us about AGI, artificial general intelligence, and you referred to $1.7 billion, but in our neighbor to the south, they are working with hundreds of billions of dollars, so we will never be able to compete on that front with them. So some are saying that the words coming from the boss, as it were, should really be put to good use and be applied so that we can have a good foundation for international treaties to regulate AI. These kinds of steps, are you thinking about these steps? And if it's not part of the strategy, then I think this is a significant oversight with regard to everyone in our society, because there's a real problem here. So Mr. ETHI, for instance, said that Canada absolutely has to abolish the development of AGI and encourages other countries to do the same. So what's your position in all this? So in your consultation process, did you not have people who had these sorts of ideas? Thank you, Chair, for the question. Research into the future of AI and superintelligence or artificial general intelligence is a key aspect and component of the ecosystem here in Canada, and the government supports building these capacities. The Canadian AI Safety Institute, for instance, is really the cutting edge of awareness in this sense. And they are working on safe use of AI. A member of this committee is Joshua Bengio. Joel Pinot as well is a member. And we have quite good coordination with the new organization of Mr. Bengio, Law Zero. So they are really working on the frontiers of the use of AI in more responsible ways and in more straightforward ways for Canadians and for the world in general. So Mr. Bengio, in his report about the state of AI in the world, and this is a report he prepared for the UN, he says that there is no consensus as to the future of AI. It's up to governments and citizens to decide on the path that AI research will take. That is why one pillar of our strategy is really dedicated to the protection of Canadians with national research, responsibility, and reliability components built into it. And there are international efforts underway with other countries to set some benchmarks to build AI that will serve all Canadians and everyone else across the world. Do I still have time? Yes, you still have a minute. Okay, great. Well, in concrete terms, what will you do to help build this community that collaborates internationally? Because you will not be able to achieve all this on your own. Just because you're talking about responsibility and AI, and you won't magically have the results appear. As we speak, technology goes beyond the understanding and capacities of those who are at the cutting edge of this all, and you know this better than I do. So you're telling me that this is part of your strategy, but I haven't seen any concrete deployment of this strategy. Well, maybe I'll underline three aspects. First, Canada has multilateral efforts in this realm. There is the Safety Institute, the Global Safety Institute, Australia, the United States, France, Germany, Korea are members, and Canada is really leading a pillar of this organization. We also have bilateral initiatives. Canada just signed a new agreement with Germany on digital matters, and there is it focuses on the security aspect of these technologies. Then there are external experts, including Law Zero and our entire research community, so working with different countries, but also internationally. Thank you. Apologies, Mr. Terrio. I miscalculated the time, and I gave you an additional minute. But you took advantage of that minute, so this was quite interesting. It's okay.
Our witnesses, first and foremost, for your patience, and thank you for your input. I have no other business. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you on Monday afternoon. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
you.